Hey everybody, welcome back. So today I'm going to go over a kayak that a lot of you have been asking about, and the one you see behind me, this is the Titan X 10.5. So you've probably already seen the video I did on the 12.5 foot version. This video is really going to be focused on how is the 10.5 foot version different than the 12.5. Beside from the length of the kayak, what do you get with one over the other? Stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to go over a couple of key differences that really will probably determine on which one you go with if you're torn between these two kayaks. As always, thanks for coming by, and let's get right into it, guys. Okay, so what you see here, this is the native Titan X 10.5, and like I said in the intro, I'm really going to focus on the differences, the biggest differences between the two kayaks. The biggest similarity is really the cockpit. So your stand-up area, your leg area, whatever you want to call it, is virtually the same dimensions. You're giving up maybe a ½ inch here, a ½ inch there. It's really the same length. So don't think of a 10.5 foot versus 12.5 foot, a tall versus a short person kayak. They've got some different features and some different uses, but ultimately, if you're wanting a 10.5 and you're tall like me, this is not going to be a problem. It's the exact same seat, exact same setup. Where you typically reduce your length on any kayak, let alone the Titan X, is going to be in the nose and the rear, the tank well, the rear storage there. So you'll notice here on the front, the biggest difference between the 12.5 and the 10.5 here is in front of the hatch and the volume of the hatch. So the hatch on the 12.5, you do give up some space on there. You can see here the drop-in tubs, the 10.5 versus the 12.5, there is a size difference. The size difference there does give you a smaller opening here on the 10.5 if you want to stuff stuff inside the hull. But not a deal breaker for me personally, but just know that if you're wanting to stuff a lot of stuff inside the hull, you are going to have a little bit more of a restriction on this one. One thing I do like that they did, the access plate, this is where you're going to put your plug-ins for your motors, your battery setups. They've moved it onto the lid here on the 10.5 version as opposed to the 12.5 where they've got it actually on the front there because you got a little bit more real estate there. Inside here as well, you still have adequate space in the battery compartment. You still got those integrated straps that go over the battery to secure it on there, but just know that it is a little bit less volume on there. I'm going to skip over the cockpit for the most part because it is the same size. You're still going to be able to run the exact same foot control steering that is available on the 12.5. You're going to be able to run it on this. It's the same design here on the front, so I'm not concerned with retaining any water like you've seen in a lot of previous models with Native's Titan and Slayer series. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm still going to test that out in a future video, obviously, but just know that I really don't think that's going to be an issue. You still got the same access plates here on the 10.5, just maybe in some different locations. You still got them on each side of the seat. The tackle storage areas here, these are still going to fit that 3600 series Plano box, your tackle box storage. You still have ample gear track here, so you're still getting a lot of the same functionality. Okay, so this is the tank well, and this is really, this is going to be the biggest difference between the 12.5 and the 10.5, in my opinion. You do lose some volume here in the tank well, but you've got a little bit of a different battery box setup here in the back. So the seat position, I've got it all the way front here just to kind of open this up to talk about it. You can see here all the way back, the seat, it's meant to kind of tuck underneath there. And that kind of changes the volume because the lid is considerably different on the 10.5 than it is the 12.5. The 12.5 has a little bit more of that slanted lid, and that also increases the volume inside. That can create some challenges depending on what kind of batteries you're wanting to run. So in my opinion, you're unlimited on the kind of batteries you're going to be running on the 12.5 version. The 10.5 version, it's going to require a little bit more thought depending on what direction you're wanting to go with the kayak, and that's really one of my biggest concerns. I'll go over that a little bit here later, but just kind of wanted to go over the finished product here. Again, you've still got these little Yak Attack paddle holders. and then a different mount. So if you're wanting to troll along there, your access plate is actually on top of the battery box as opposed to slightly behind it on the 12.5 version. You got a little bit of a different placement in the back here for your motor plug as well for the stern mount motor setups. Just know that your biggest difference, your biggest sacrifice in going with one over the other is going to be your tank well and your rear storage areas. Okay, so let's go over the biggest benefits that I see with this kayak. So with the 10'5" version, you're getting a shorter platform with the same size rudder that you get on the 12.5" version. That's going to give you a much more maneuverable kayak. Think of tighter spaces. Think of smaller bodies of water, smaller lakes, maybe bigger ponds, and also maybe some deeper rivers, depending on what your setup is. If you know you're not going to be running through some shallows, this may be a better option for you. You still have a lot of storage, you still have ample tank well space, and a pedal drive that is just tough as nails. It's one of the most durable kayak pedal drive systems on the market and has been for several years. The Propel drive has been around forever. It was actually the first pedal drive to have the instant reverse on it, so that's something to note. And then you still have that really, Propel drives have always had kind of a bit of a larger prop. So that gives you a lot more propulsion. You get a little bit more speed out of the same amount of effort as you would see on a lot of other models out there. But I like the setup personally. The concerns, the things that you really need to think about when looking at this kayak, and really the biggest cons I would say are, it's still a heavy boat. It's 150 pounds versus 172 pounds on the 12.5. It's considerably lighter than the 12.5, but it is still a heavy kayak, so keep that in mind. Another thing, and my biggest knock on the 10'5", and this is going to depend on where you're wanting to go with this kayak. So as it sits, they're both phenomenal kayaks, but if you're wanting to put a motor, namely the bow mount XI3 from Motor Guide or the Minn Kota bow mount motor, in addition to a Newport or a Torqeedo setup on the back, is that battery box. The battery box on the 10'5", you're losing a considerable amount of volume, being that it's tucked under the seat and it's got that flat lid on it. So what I've got here, this is the 24 volt, 50 amp hour battery from Newport. The reason I'm using this battery is it's almost the exact same dimensions as a typical 12 volt, 100 amp hour battery. But we could see in here, there's a good couple of inch difference in between the hull and the top of that lid. That renders that battery compartment obsolete. And also, this is me taking the tub out of that compartment. For the battery compartment, but if they did that and gave you more volume, it's going to keep your seat from going too far back. So I don't really see that as a fix either. But really, I don't know if that was a miss or on purpose there. If you're wanting to run your XI3 or your Torqeedo or Newport setups, you're going to want that 12.5. But if you want to motorize and you want a shorter kayak, this can still work. So if you've watched my video on the motor plate that replaces the Propel drive, it gives you that flat transom. I'll plug it up here in the top corner of the video, but that would allow you to run your clamp-on trolling motor setup on this kayak, and your smaller 12 volt batteries that go with those setups are going to be more than adequate to fit in that compartment. If I was running that kind of setup, this is exactly the kayak that I would go with over the 12.5. But if I wanted a lot more room and I wanted to run that XI3 or the Torqeedo or the Newport, I'm going to go with the 12.5, namely because you have no spot to really put that battery on the 10.5 version. Just know though, within the same company, Big Adventures, that manufactures the native kayaks are also the ones that manufacture Bonafide. So Bonafide just came out with the PWR 129. I just did a video on that here not too long ago. But if you don't like this setup and you don't want the 12.5 because of the sheer size of it, you're going to want to consider that PWR. So the overall lineup of Big Adventures, it just depends on what your plans are and where you're wanting to go with your kayak. The PWR really kind of shines for a setup like this that you don't you're not interested in the pedal drive. You're only interested in powering it. So keep that in mind as well. But anyways, what do you think about the 10'5"? It's a great kayak. It just, depending on what you're wanting to do, depending on your wants and needs, that's really going to steer you in the direction that you need to go within the Big Adventure lineup. So thank you so much for watching the video. If there's anything I missed that you're curious about, let me know down in the comments. I'll definitely try to get back to you as soon as possible. I'm going to get this out on the water. I'm going to try it out and see what I think of it versus the 12.